Hello, and welcome to Your Bridge to Addiction Resources, a program that is sponsored by the People Chronicles and the Council on Chemical Abuse. My name is Yvonne Stroman. I'm the Community Program Specialist at the Council on Chemical Abuse, and today I have with me a very special friend. We're going to talk a little bit about community education at the Council on Chemical Abuse and the importance of why we do community education. So with me is Drew Eisenhower. Drew, how are you?
I am doing well, Yvonne. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
It's good to see you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the annual conference.
Okay.
And why I asked you to come on is because you've been a long-time coordinator. You're since retired, yes. But prior to as part of your role at the Council on Chemical Abuse, you were the coordinator of the annual conference.
Right.
So part of the Council on Chemical Abuse mission, it really is to promote education and awareness regarding alcohol, tobacco, other drugs, as well as other addictive behaviors.
Right.
And so, well, first let me ask you this. How long were you with the Council on Chemical Abuse?
I was with the Council on Chemical Abuse for 20 years. I came with them in 1995 and retired January 1st of 2015.
Okay.
So I spent 20 years with the Council, and as you're right, one of the charges I had there was to do a lot of public education, and I think the highlight of the year was always the annual conference.
Right.
The annual conference, as you said, was a community event. It's designed to help raise awareness about drug and alcohol and other addiction problems within the community, and how that we all, as part of the community, need to be part of the solution.
Great. And so since I think in my records it showed since about 2001, or did it go back prior to that? How did it start? Because it just...
That's a great question. I actually started as a debate or a conversation that we were having at the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Providers Association meeting, and we were starting to develop a large fund of cash in our treasury.
Okay.
They said, what are we going to do with this money? And a suggestion came up, well, maybe we should have an annual conference, or a conference this year, and make it an annual event. And the council was involved at the time with the Providers Association. And I said, well, it started initially as a joint venture between the Treatment Providers Association and the Council on Chemical Abuse. That lasted about 2 years, and then we took over as the main lead and took it to another level.
Okay.
It was designed originally as a way of educating general population, primarily professionals at the time, which later expanded its mission to look at the entire community and open itself for anyone who has an interest in how do we address drug and alcohol and other addiction problems in our society.
Yeah, and so over the years there have been a number of different topics. And also, there's also been a connection, for example, co-occurring disorders in terms of mental health and drug and alcohol, domestic violence and drug and alcohol. Why did the Council on Chemical Abuse feel that was important to make those connectors?
We want people to understand how interwoven addiction is within all kinds of problems within society. And you're right, we have looked at a lot of different areas through the years. We have looked at addiction, the fact that addiction is a disease. We have looked at how it correlates, as you said, between domestic violence problems, between mental health problems. A lot of times are with people that have addiction, not always, but sometimes addiction begins when a person uses drugs or alcohol to medicate, say, their own depression. And maybe the depression is the primary, or maybe it's just the secondary type of thing, but eventually addiction progresses. Addiction gets to the point where people have to address both mental health and drug and alcohol. Very rarely do they not exist together.
Right.
And we needed to look at the dual diagnosis. We needed to look at how do we have to use medication as part of what we do in the treating of addiction. It is a brain disorder, and as a disorder, there's abnormalities in the way the brain circuitry works, how it receives the information when it gets the mood-altering substance or behavior, and what we need to do to intervene. We want to bring that awareness to the general public. It is the most disrespected disease I think we have in society today. There is still a great deal of stigma out there around the idea that it's willful misconduct. Or just suck it up and do what you need to do.
Or it's a moral issue.
A moral issue. It doesn't work that way. And science has definitively demonstrated that there's no debate about it. It's not a disease concept anymore. It is a disease. One of the things, as I was noticing the other day when I was watching the news, that Governor Wolf came on and he used that term multiple times. Addiction is a disease, and how do we address this disease? Yeah.
And I think the importance of having the conference is really the opportunity to educate people that it is a disease. And it's a reinforcement about how that really brain disease works, how it triggers the brain to act in a different way than what we say normal people do. And so it leads then to some irregularities in terms of behavior, in terms of how people function. And so all of those things are very pivotal, that the common community understand the nature of this disease.
One of the things we also want to do is to tie in other county agencies. Maybe it be Children and Youth Services, maybe it be juvenile probation, adult probation, the court systems, because they're dealing largely with the aftermath of what happens with addiction. And we know that one venue alone is not going to address it. It's a holistic concept of addressing addiction disease. Berks County, I really think, leads the state in a lot of those areas. We really are very progressive here with an understanding in our courts, with our district attorney's office, through probation and parole, through the Children and Youth Services, that more things need to be done than just punishment.
Right.
How do we address this illness? How do we do it most effectively? And part of the concept of the conference was to bring those people in and educate them, and maybe as a probation officer who comes, who's dealing with someone that continually repeats behaviors, and why is this guy or gal continue to do this? We want to educate them as to what's the most effective way to approach this. And it started initially just for professionals in the drug and alcohol field primarily, but we've expanded it to incorporate anybody that has an interest or is working with people with those addiction problems to come to the conference, network with other people, come and find what the solutions are.
Yeah.
You know, we are very familiar, I think, here's the problem, but just knowing the problem doesn't bring us the solution.
Right.
And this is what the conference, and this is what public education is designed to do, is how do we reach solution so that we don't have the revolving door, so that it doesn't perpetuate from generation to generation to generation.
Yeah, and it's a very good point, because I know I've attended the conference in times past, and there were parents that were there that were concerned about their young people. There were also educators from the public schools.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's also should be known that we also allow educators in terms of students.
Right.
Students who are at the local colleges, we invite them to come to the conference. If you're, a major in addiction studies, come and learn more about the field and what's happening now in the field in terms of innovative approaches.
Also, what else we begin to incorporate and see this more of an incorporation are the churches, because many times a minister, pastor, whatever the situation may be, has a parishioner, a member of their church, and they are approached with the problem and they're really not familiar with how to handle it.
Right.
We want to get as many people educated as possible and create that conduit from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And the only way we address a problem effectively is to raise awareness with solid information. And this conference, again, is like the highlight of the year. The general public's invited to come. We want as many people as possible to be educated about the problem and the solution.
Yeah.
That's what the conference is really cornerstone on. That's what we want to do. Also, what we found out within the conference too is we want to give some public recognition to individuals that have made some outstanding contributions in the areas of drug and alcohol, addiction, intervention, treatment, education, community awareness, whatever it may be. We want people to be recognized for the hard work that they do. It's not an easy subject to broach with most people, because addiction is so shame-based and guilt-laden that people we kind of refer it as the elephant in the living room. Here's this problem, and it's as obvious to the outsider that, hey, there's an elephant living there, but nobody wants to approach it.
Yeah.
And we want to get people to remove those blinders and say, look, let's address addiction as an illness as we do with heart disease, with cancer,
Absolutely.
with diabetes. Let's educate, let's start people young and let them know, hey, it's not your fault, but there's things that we can do to help you get well. And oftentimes it starts with intervention. And intervention is only going to happen effectively if we're aware that the problem exists.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any problem here. It's like the emperor's clothes, there's no problem here.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the importance is that the more often that we can have those conversations, the more often we can bring education and awareness, it would allow a platform for people to actually come together and begin to talk about there is a problem here, and now what are we going to do about it? How do we get people access to the help that they need?
We need to move them off that point of shame, guilt, and fear.
Yeah.
And many times within the families, I know over my career working in the drug and alcohol field as an educator and as a person who did intervention work, it's primarily family members a lot of times that approach very quietly. I have a son, I have a daughter, I have a spouse, I have a grandparent, I have a whomever it might be, a good friend, and I just don't know how to approach it. There are effective ways to approach these things. And I say, in dealing with addiction, it's a disease of denial. And the denial morphs itself into delusion, where people begin to believe their own lies. It is at a base, it is a mental illness. There's an abnormality there, and the addict will do whatever they need to do to protect that addiction. One-on-one, it's pretty hard to argue, I don't want to say argue with the addict, but convince them. But when you get groups together, and those groups say, hey, you've got a problem and we want to help you, that's when effective treatment begins to take place. The conference, again, is an open invitation to anyone, whether they're working professionally, whether they're just from the general populace that has an interest in how can I be part of the solution? Because the solution is only going to be as strong as its weakest link. We need to try to strengthen it so that everybody's committed and saying, one of the things that's tragic right now is this opioid epidemic. And when I pick up the paper and I see a 19, 22, 24-year-old who died at home, I'm not saying always, but the first thing that will run through my mind is, was it addiction? Was it drug use? And we have to stem that tide, and it's going to have to start with open discussions. It's going to have to start with awareness and putting aside the shame that is so paramount when we deal with addictive disease.
Because after all, we are dealing with human lives, and we are dealing with the potential fatality if we don't do anything.
And we know for every one addict, we're looking at 4 to 6 other people that are directly affected. So, if you take I often use this example when I instructed, if you took 100 people, and 1 in 10 of those was addicted, that would give you 10 people. And each one of those people affects 4 to 6. Let's say they affect just 4 people. That's 50 more. Half your population is affected. If you don't think that other half of the population that's not addicted or not affected isn't going to be affected by that group, you're crazy. It is a societal problem, and we've got to pull our heads out of the sand, so to speak, and say, let's be compassionate, let's be forthright, and let's do what's necessary in order to address this deadly disease that we're fighting right now in this country. So we're going to wrap up here, Drew, and I think that for purposes of this conversation, you're retired, but you still I'm still involved.
You're still involved,
yes,
though.
This is my passion.
Yes. And so what is the one thing, as we kind of wrap up here, that you want to kind of share about the disease of addiction as it relates to the conference and the community education that you really want folks to
I would like folks to understand, one, that there's hope.
Good.
And hope comes through awareness, and awareness comes through education and knowledge. And the hope, no matter how far down you may see someone who's struggling with addiction, hope always exists. I remember years ago, Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night spoke at Sober Stop. And Chuck had been to treatment 31 times. 31 times, and at the time he spoke, he had decades of recovery under his belt. I have met people that have 7, 8, 10, 12 treatment experiences. I've met people that have 1 treatment experience and have gotten well. People get well. They overcome. We want to bring that forth at the conference and let people know, hey, here are the resources in the community. Don't be afraid to ask. We understand and we want to help. but we can't help if people won't identify with the problem. And that's what the conference is all about, is educating the general population and saying, help is out there. Miracles, we live in the, I still believe we live in the age of miracles. Time and time again, I see them happen.
Yes.
And I see people recover all the time. And that's the message I'd like to leave with.
Well, thank you, Drew. Thank you for stopping over and chit-chatting with me this morning. And so for those that would like more information about our annual conference, we welcome you to visit the Council on Chemical Abuse website at www.cocaberks.org. That's COCABERKS.org, or contact our office at 610-376-8669. Again, this is your Bridge to Addiction Resources. We thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Check back every week for a new story with your Bridge to Addiction Resources. You can call 610-376-8669 or visit online at cocaberks.org. COCABERKS.org. Be sure to like and follow the Council on Chemical Abuse on Facebook and Twitter.